Hello and welcome to Theatre.Reviews with Paul Seven. I'm here at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon to see Much Ado About Nothing. Hello, I'm Paul Seven Lewis, and this is my channel where I review theatre shows. You can also find me at the website Theatre.Reviews. In these reviews, I try to tell you what the play or musical is about, what the production is like, and how well acted it is. For this review, I made a rare trip to Stratford-upon-Avon, but I think I might start going there more often. It's a lovely town with lots of Shakespeare-connected stuff, including a Shakespeare bookshop, Shakespeare gift shop, even a Shakespeare repair shop. And the theatre itself has a wonderful bar and restaurant on the top floor where you can buy a tremendously good cocktail and look out over the Avon. Now, we've got Dear England playing at the National Theatre, and now our second most subsidised theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Company, has a football-themed play too. It's Much Ado About Nothing. Did it score, or was it a load of balls? And how did the TV stars playing Beatrice and Benedick fare with Shakespeare and the Stratford stage? Did Freema Agyeman from Doctor Who and New Amsterdam and Nick Blood from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hit the back of the net? Keep watching and I'll tell you, along with a few more football analogies. In fact, let me say straight away, it was a game of two halves. First of all, a spoiler alert. I will be talking about the plot of Much Ado About Nothing. So if you don't know the play, then maybe you should stop watching right now and click on that little link above and you can watch some of my other videos. Now, you won't be surprised that this production isn't set in Elizabethan times. In fact, you'd probably fall off your seat if it was. Some people object to reimagining Shakespeare's plays in other times and places, but personally, I find it can offer helpful insights. And this particular Shakespeare play needs those insights. Let me explain. There are two parallel love stories in Much Ado About Nothing, a comic one, which is probably what makes it one of the most popular of Shakespeare's plays, and a more serious plot, which can be a problem for a modern audience to connect with. I'll come back to that in a moment, but let's look at the light-hearted element first. The relationship between Benedick and Beatrice are both wary of hitching themselves to a partner. So in all the time they spent avoiding marriage, they've become quite mature and able to present a front of cutting cynicism. Shakespeare leaves no doubt that there is something in each of them that is attractive and attracted to the other, except they won't admit it. And they cover this by insulting each other. So a lot of the fun is the way they're eventually tricked by their friends into admitting that they do love one another. And then, what's really interesting, how love changes them. In this production, they're played by Freema Agyeman and Nick Blood. Both act their parts pretty well. Miss Agyeman has only recently returned to theatre after a long spell acting on American TV. But she's already building quite a reputation as a stage actor, and this performance will undoubtedly cement it. She speaks the lines beautifully. Beatrice gives as good as she gets and offers apparent confidence to mask her inner emotions. Nick Blood is a likeable Benedick with an appropriate swagger. However, they don't bounce off one another as much as you might hope. They should be like two Premiership footballers tackling each other. Instead, their dexterous verbal sparring never goes beyond a Sunday morning kickabout. Just a reminder, you're watching Theatre Reviews with Paul Seven, and you can find my reviews in writing as well as my summaries of other critics' reviews at Theatre.Reviews, where I also list the best rated and best value London shows. Anyway, back to Much Ado About Nothing at Stratford-upon-Avon, and whether this reimagining works. And it's particularly important because the darker plot concerns a young couple called Hero and Claudio. And it's a can of worms because it conjures a highly misogynistic society, which we do find hard to relate to, even though Shakespeare exposes the sexism among the men and the unfair treatment of the women. So we meet veteran footballer Don John, who's essentially a mischief maker, someone who has no clear reason for causing trouble and no complexity or depth, unlike many of Shakespeare's villains, who are given motives or sometimes redeeming qualities. To be fair, this production does suggest that he's jealous of his young rival Claudio, but that's not really pursued. Don John is played by Nojan Kazai with an alpha male charm. Anyway, he uses deception, and this is a play that involves a lot of chicanery, to ensure that the relationship between the two young fiancés is torn apart on the eve of their wedding. And he does this by tricking Claudio into believing that Hero, far from being faithful, has a lover. Now, as an audience, we find it hard to believe that Claudio, even as a credulous young man, and these footballers are not always renowned for their intellect, but her father as well, who both profess to love her, have so little faith in her. Even more unlikely, when all is revealed, after even more trickery, and Claudio says sorry, she forgives him. Daniel Adeosun gives a solid performance as Claudio. Eleanor Worthington-Cox does an excellent job in the thankless role of Hero, presented for much of the play as a voiceless victim. She doesn't even defend herself against the false accusations. But in this production, she does show a lively ambition in earlier scenes where she's given a bit more to do than in the original Shakespeare, with some very nice songs, and at the end as well, where she looks at pursuing a career of her own. It's hard for a modern audience to comprehend the misogynistic, male-dominated society that we see here. And that's a problem directors face. And I think that productions do often struggle to get us to accept it, to find a modern parallel that we can relate to. So Michael Longhurst, fresh from his success as the Donmars artistic director and the man responsible for the recent hit with Macbeth with David Tennant and Cash Jumbo, has chosen the world of elite men's soccer as the setting. Not the English Premiership, which surely is a league of gentlemen after Gareth Southgate's tenure as England manager. I know that to be true because I've seen Dear England. No, this is Italian football. Well, after all, Shakespeare's play is set in Messina, and perhaps the men's behaviour fits, no doubt unfairly, our stereotypical image of a certain kind of Italian male. Leonato, the owner of Messina FC, is the spitting image of Silvio Berlusconi, which usefully reminds us of his bunga bunga parties when the parties begin here on stage. It's a fine characterisation of a self-centred millionaire by Peter Forbes. We can see the position of women in this world is mainly as trophy wives and girlfriends, but Beatrice is not a wag in this production. She's an ex-footballer turned commentator. And we don't need reminding of very recent occasions when misogyny was displayed against female football commentators. So, setting the play in the world of football is quite a good concept. And it works well, initially. Unfortunately, it never quite hits the back of the net, because as the play progresses, the football becomes less and less in evidence. The presentation of this particular setting is very impressive when you first enter the auditorium, because you see what appears to be a stadium stretching into the distance. It's a triumph for designer Jon Bausor. However, the thrust part of the stage is dominated by a communal bath, and unfortunately this doesn't work as well as you might imagine it would. It's used to comic effect on a few occasions, but otherwise tends to get in the way of the cast moving around the stage. The women are objectified and verbally abused by the men, the paparazzi, and comments on social media, which are flashed up on the auditorium walls. So there's quite a lot of misogyny going on there, with manipulated photos and fake news, offering a good modern parallel to the trickery that pervades this play. You're watching Theatre Reviews with Paul Seven. Be sure to visit my website, Theatre.Reviews, where you can read these reviews and also my summaries of other critics' reviews. There's no AI involved, it's all my own work, and I don't try to flog you tickets. Just give you links to buy direct from the theatre or producer. So what about the acting in this production of Much Ado About Nothing at Stratford-upon-Avon? The actors playing the footballers are all physically fit, and they take their kit off a bit, so you get to see that. They certainly look like they could be soccer heroes. And the women are all very glamorous and look like they could be wags. So that leaves us with the actual acting. Well, there are some pretty good performances. They speak the words well, as you would hope from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they create a world of casual offensiveness and sexist banter that seems to come naturally out of Shakespeare's own language, which in this play is largely prose. What's missing is a certain nastiness that the text demands. It's more as if they're passing the ball rather than shooting at the goal. The Watch, here seen as security staff, who inadvertently discover the truth of Don John's plot, are sometimes cut from productions. A lot of people seem to find their antics unfunny, but here Antonio Magro makes an excellent Dogberry, speaking his malapropisms with a dignified, obsequious demeanour. But I do have one quibble about this production. Let me ask you a question. What do you most enjoy about Shakespeare? I suspect that whatever kind of interesting interpretation there is, no matter how well it's acted, I think the number one reason for our continuing to want to see Shakespeare's plays is his language. Because while he may steal plots from here, there and everywhere, when he interprets that story for us, he has such an understanding of human nature that he creates complex, interesting characters who express themselves through the most wonderful poetic language which conveys to us all the emotions that they feel and makes us feel them too. And who, might you think, would be more likely to protect that language than the Royal Shakespeare Company? So you can imagine, I felt let down that this production of Much Ado About Nothing messed with Shakespeare's text. I mean, not in a huge way, but to actually change some of the words for modern references and expressions, for example, bringing the word twerking or vaping into the text, well, I just feel it was plain wrong. Now, I know it might sound stuffy and reactionary, and some people watching this review might say, well, you've got to bring Shakespeare up to date for a modern audience. But, well, there are plenty of ways of doing that through the interpretation. The words are our one actual connection with Shakespeare. And why you shouldn't mess with his words, RSC. Anyway, it was fun, but not as much fun as it could have been. And as for the seriousness, not as serious as it should have been. I give Much Ado About Nothing at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre 3 stars. I hope you found this review interesting and helpful. If you did, please subscribe to this channel, Theatre.Reviews with Paul 7. You can read my reviews at Theatre.Reviews, where I also summarise other critics' reviews. And you can follow me on social media. Thank you for watching.